Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mahana ki koutou, nō reira tēnā koutou, katoa. A very warm welcome to everyone this morning. Great to have you on board. We've just hit about 270 attendees, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this BDO Back to Business series. A very timely topic, we believe, on resetting strategies. We've had so much engagement over the last few weeks where people and businesses and organisations are really focusing on the opportunities going ahead. So we're looking forward to having a good session with you and some Q&A in part two. Shortly, I'll introduce you to Rhea Cowell and Tarunesh Singh. They'll be taking the rest of the program for the first 20-25 minutes and look forward to the presentation. From Rhea, Tarunesh and the team, want to wish everybody well for, guess what, it's day one of level 2. Can you believe it? We have made it. It's been an incredible journey. I want to wish everybody well. If you haven't got back to your office yet or you're starting today, all the very best. Appreciate a lot of businesses and organisations would have kicked on under level 3, but certainly a big heartfelt best wishes to all of you. Also this afternoon, as you'll be well aware, we've got the budget announcements coming out. We're very much looking forward to hearing what the Finance Minister's got to announce. We know a couple of mega themes that will be coming through will be around looking after the unemployed and ensuring that we have good stability around job positions in businesses and organisations. But I think in particular, what we're really looking forward to hearing about is business generally, business support packages going forward. So let's keep an eye on those. And certainly we encourage application of some of the learnings today to the budget announcements later this afternoon. Some of the content we'll cover will be certainly an emphasis on the remainder of this calendar year for 2020 and how we can apply some really smart, innovative short-term strategies. So you'll be hearing shortly from Rhea and Tarunesh about some of our thinking in that regard. We'll also cover things like rethinking and understanding even more so what organisational culture and behaviours will look like as we go forward, because it's not going to be the same. Things have already changed over the last 2 months. Also redefining and reinventing how we'll look at new and potential revenue streams. I know that's something we've had a lot of inquiry about, and applying good data analytics and digital innovation to the way that we look after our businesses and organisations going forward. The process is for today that it's going to be recorded, so don't panic if you've got other friends and attendees that would like to view the presentation at a later date. That's certainly possible. The slides will be made available. You'll see there's a Q&A box that's already highlighted with a little question mark. Feel free during the course of the presentation to fire your questions through. Obviously, we're not going to cover every single question today, but we'll endeavour to get back to you as we have for all the other webinars. And in about 25 minutes, we'll go through as many of those questions as we can. There'll be some future topics which we'll cover at the end of the session, but in the meantime, I just want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the presentation, and we look forward to your questions in just a moment. We'll see you soon. Over to you, Rhea.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Rhea Cowell and I'm a Senior Strategy Advisor here at BDO. My main role at BDO is helping organisations to figure out where they're going to go in the future and how they're going to make decisions about what they need to do to get there. At the moment, I've been working a lot with businesses as they make their different decisions around what different levers that they have available for them and in what order they need to be pulling those. So it'll be really interesting to discuss that a bit further with you at the end. And I'll now pass you over to Tarunesh.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and welcome back to those of you who've joined us over the past couple of weeks as well. My name is Tarunesh Singh, and I lead BDO's risk advisory practice based in Auckland. As the name would suggest, the work that we do in risk advisory is all centered around risk. We help clients to identify and then navigate the risks facing their business. Strategy is absolutely critical, though. It's our starting point. After all, risk and strategy are two ends of the same issue. One being the plan of where you'd like to get to, and the other being those issues that might stop you from actually getting there. In terms of the session today, Philip's already sort of set the scene, but I just wanted to point out that that the main purpose here is to provide you with some ideas and insights that will help you with your own strategy resets over the coming months and further down the track. We've pulled together some thoughts and points to focus on to make that process a bit more manageable and ultimately more effective. I'll start with a quick recap on where our focus has collectively been over the past few months. I'll then talk briefly about the horizon or future points that we ought to be focusing on when planning, before Rhea and I then outline 4 key building blocks and our thinking around those for a robust strategy. We'll end by answering some of your questions towards the end of the session. So if you've got anything on your mind as we proceed through the presentation, just drop it in that Q&A box, please. It's important to keep in mind that this webinar isn't designed to be an exhaustive list of the steps that you need to take to navigate the crisis and economic fallout. Given the unique nature of each of your circumstances and businesses, that's impossible to do collectively and in just 30 minutes. What it does aim to do, though, is to provide you with some valuable sound bites to consider as you take stock of where your business is now, how it's been affected, and where you'd ultimately like to take it moving forward. Just moving on. All right, in terms of recent focus, while case numbers and alert levels are tracking in the right direction, I wanted to start by spending just a few minutes on where businesses have focused their attention over the past 7 or 8 weeks before we turn our attention to the rest of the year. Naturally, and rightly so, most businesses have focused solely on the here and now by reacting to the outbreak, government restrictions, and the ensuing economic fallout. This has been covered at great length by BDO and others, but still warrants some consideration now. It's still relevant. It serves as a line in the sand and a point of reference as we turn our attention forward through to the end of 2020 and beyond. It's also important to note that while many businesses worked through these issues weeks ago, others are still on that journey, particularly those that were propped up by factors such as rent relief, April cash collections, and the wage subsidy. It's also worth keeping in mind that many operators can only assess the full extent of the damage now as we move down the levels and more government guidance is released. To our mind and our thinking, there are 5 key areas to focus on over the short term. React and prioritize safety. The safety of your people is absolutely paramount. That's a given. With a short-term focus, react to your unique constraints and reshape ways of working and policies where possible. For example, mobilizing teams to be able to work from home, as we've seen many do, and do successfully at that, or setting up an e-commerce channel for those non-contact revenue streams. Communication is absolutely key at this point as well, inward and outward. Employees want to know how to work and what to expect as the weeks play out, and customers want to know what you're able to provide and by when. In terms of managing cash, cash is king. We all know this. Manage cash constraints to avoid any unnecessary costs wherever possible. Focus on funding essential activity such as working capital and immediate continuity costs. Determine what's essential to stop, start, and continue, and review all initiatives and projects that were on the table pre-COVID-19 to identify any areas where outflows can be paused. Access available support, so take full advantage of all available support such as the wage subsidy, business finance guarantee scheme, support available from lenders such as repayment holidays, rent relief from landlords, and much more recently, the small business cash flow loan scheme. Plan for more severe actions as needed. This ties in with the horizons I'll talk about in the next slide. The key here is not to get fixed on just the here and now while dealing with what's urgent, but also to focus on a little further down the track and the impact that today's issues and decisions might have in 3 months' time, as an example. Plan for more severe actions as needed regarding revenue, cost of operations, and what you need to do to ultimately preserve business viability. Reallocate resources. So reallocate resources to pockets of current and future growth to minimize revenue loss and take advantage of any opportunities that arise. It's important to recognize that we can't and shouldn't be bound to the plan that existed through to this point. The situation and the rules have both changed, meaning that any existing strategy is likely to need change as well. Understandably and rightly so, businesses are focused on mitigating short-term losses and protecting their people and customers. This is key, but it's only the first step towards this new normal that we're all talking about. To truly respond, adapt, and ultimately succeed, businesses must focus on three horizons: what's happening now, driving what to do next, and ultimately building their new normal. The graphic you have in front of you is drawn from a starting point at the end of March, that last week in March, where the PM announced the alert level system, and we then moved to level 4. These are generalized timings though. Your now, next, and normal, inverted commas there, may be different. For example, I've defined now, the now phase as going through to the end of level 4. For many businesses, for example, bars and restaurants, they may not be able to move out of this reactive phase until we move to level 1, or perhaps until we exit the level system altogether. The now phase is about maintaining and defending core business, essentially all those actions outlined on the previous slide. The next phase is focused on resuming and ramping up operations while navigating restrictions and other constraints. It's also about identifying and nurturing emerging opportunities that either may not have existed or were not things that you previously considered pre-COVID. The normal phase, or new normal, is about adapting to new normal behaviours on all fronts, including consumer behaviours and demand trends, employee expectations, government regulation, and so on. The key here is to maintain this multi-horizon outlook at any given point on the journey. For example, when taking actions now to preserve the business, consider their impact on your ability to take advantage of emerging opportunities over the next few months, and ultimately what that might mean for where you'd like to take the business in the future. As you turn your attention to, or from your now to your next, and then ultimately your normal, we suggest focusing on 4 key areas, and those are the issues that we'll talk through over the next few slides. They're rethinking your organisation, recovering your revenue streams, rebuilding your operations, and how you can retool for the future. Rhea and I will share our thoughts on each of these areas over the next few slides. The time spent and the challenges faced in lockdown have highlighted countless examples of businesses making decisions and acting with unprecedented speed. Understandably, that's not been the case for all, but there have been many instances involving a level of decision-making speed that's challenged the norm that we're used to. I've actually got a great client example of this. One of my clients, Home Care Medical, is a social enterprise organisation contracted by the New Zealand government to provide a range of free telehealth services, including Healthline. It also provides around-the-clock COVID-19 help advice line, as well as supporting contact tracing and registering returning travellers for isolation. During the COVID-19 response, the team was managing 12 times more calls, understandably, when compared to the same period in 2019. To meet this huge surge in demand, Home Care Medical increased its IT infrastructure 6-fold and brought 5 additional call centres online in the space of just 7 days. More than 600 extra people were recruited, including clinical staff redeployed from other health system roles and call centre staff redeployed from local travel companies to deal with requests for non-clinical information. To be clear, the 600 increase in headcount was not over just the 7 days. It was over a few weeks, about 3 to 4 weeks, but I think we'll all agree that that's still exceptional speed. That's definitely a COVID success story, but the reason I mention it, other than sharing a great client success, is that the common theme between the success stories we've seen and across the market is that they've challenged and rethought previously held beliefs about the lead time behind initiatives and what can actually be achieved in any given period. Agility and adaptability are absolutely key moving forward. To do this, consider 3 key questions: who we are, how we work, and how we grow. In terms of who we are, make sure that your strategy is built on an absolutely clear purpose that brings your team together. One noticeable characteristic of companies that have adapted well is that they have a very strong sense of identity. Leaders and employees have a shared sense of purpose and a common performance culture. They know what the company stands for beyond shareholder value, and they know how to get things done right. In terms of how we work, this is all about decision making. Consider whether small, nimble teams have a place in how you operate moving forward. Smaller, more sharply focused teams combined with restricted yet adequate levels of consultation enable faster and often better decision making. To enable this, flatter structures are critical, along with a greater level of fluidity between roles and teams. Successful businesses are increasingly focusing on matching the right skills with the right project or challenge, which often involve multi-skilled teams pulled from different business areas and cost centers. This level of flexibility is paramount and must be built into job descriptions and team structures and reassessed constantly as and when projects crop up. Another benefit is that this sort of unique work experience is one of the best ways to attract, keep engaged, and ultimately retain top talent. In terms of how we grow, this is an issue that will be facing many, perhaps the majority of businesses over the medium term. Two factors that are most important are developing a culture that values and prioritizes partnerships, both vertical and horizontal. On one hand, vertical alliances are a way of securing against supply shocks, sharing knowledge that can ultimately give you a competitive advantage and potentially reduce supply cost. Horizontal alliances are a relatively simple way of breaking into or rapidly increasing market share in untapped markets. The other key area is to create a culture that promotes learning en masse and organizational experimentation. Working from home is a prime example of this. Yes, it's not an option for many businesses, but for those that can operate remotely, level 4 forcing their hand proved to be eye-opening. Now that we're 7 weeks on, many businesses are reporting maintained or even improved productivity, not to mention the employee satisfaction, balance, and potential cost savings that the structure offers. It's this sort of experimentation that we need moving forward, but it's something that businesses, particularly large organizations, shy away from because of the unknown. But that's exactly the type of business that will create a competitive advantage and unlock opportunities moving forward. Rhea, I'll hand over to you now to share your thoughts on the other three focus areas that we're talking about today.
Great, thanks, Tarunesh. The next focus area we recommend businesses move their attentions to is recovering revenue. As Tarunesh has already mentioned when he covered the reactive strategy section, we are making the assumption in this webinar that scenario planning, reforecasting, cash flow planning, and revising your business models have already occurred or are underway, and we really wanted to focus on discussing your ongoing and proactive strategy in this session. The key areas we wish to briefly highlight with regards to recovering revenue are identify and prioritise revenue opportunities and reasserting the need to act promptly and make scenario-based decisions. So for identify and prioritise revenue opportunities, we know that businesses may have already fundamentally rethought their revenue profile to determine where to position themselves and how they can get ahead of their competition. But now in this proactive strategy phase, we see this going a step further. Although there are still some unknowns about what the future will look like beyond Alert Level 2 and wherever we may move to from here, businesses now do have more clarity about whether and how they can operate. And with this in mind, we encourage businesses to look at the scenarios they have pulled together previously, actively identify what their primary sources of revenue are now, and take action to capture this. If you're unsure what this might look like, to actually assess or critically consider, simple tools like a value eve matrix might be helpful in prioritising measures for revenue recovery, such as this illustrative model. In this example, it considers the impact on earnings before interest and taxes against how much time it will take to impact this, slow to fast. Different potential revenue driving opportunities are then mapped against these axes, with each idea considered for what potential impact it might have on earnings against how quickly your personal organisation can execute these. In this example, you can see revenue growth management as a short-term move that this business can implement quickly with what they perceive to have a high impact on EBIT, versus e-commerce features, which will take a moderate period of time to implement and is perceived to have a low impact on EBIT. With this now or never mindset now in place, and with a clear prioritisation of revenue opportunities, we'd also like to reassert the need for businesses to act promptly and take a scenario-based approach. Having taken the time to rethink the organisation and redefine who we are, it's important that teams don't lose sight of the long term and avoid panic reactions. Businesses need to prepare for a fluctuating recovery of supply and demand and actively develop these scenarios to continuously prepare for the future and plan a potential cascade of more severe actions to preserve business viability and identify what would trigger this. For example, when do you need to launch targeted campaigns to win back loyal customers, reallocate spending to proven growth sources, or further eliminate or reduce non-essential activity in a continuously changing operating environment? Businesses will need to fundamentally rethink their revenue profile to position themselves for the long term and to get ahead of their competition. Although I'm only touching briefly on what I think we can all agree could be a full webinar on its own, we do want to build out the bigger picture of developing an overarching proactive strategic plan. So we'll move on from recovering revenue now. As New Zealand now sits at alert level 2, it is clear that the businesses that are back operating or in the process of being reopened will look different to what they were before the coronavirus. What is also clear is that coronavirus has significantly changed demand patterns for products and services across all sectors, exposing weaknesses in global and local supply chains, and has also changed the way in which our customers and markets are behaving. Businesses need to be ready with strong working hypotheses about the new dynamics in their industry, and they need to have the right strategy to outperform their competitors. Businesses will scramble to capture pent-up demand or adjust for weeks of overserved demand, and just look at what happened with couriers at alert level 3 for this example. Additionally, this picture has already been further complicated by the wide variations in when and how different markets come back online, or whether individuals may be required to self-isolate again with subsequent potential outbreaks. This transitional and proactive strategy phase is the right time to find the balance between building resilience in your business and capturing opportunities, starting with keeping people at the core as you seek to rebuild your operations. As already demonstrated by most businesses in the reactive strategy phases of alerts levels 4 and 3, the immediate need to respond to the crisis and protect the business saw employers putting the safety of employees and customers first. With this in mind, we encourage businesses to continue to ensure appropriate health and safety guidelines, proposed working arrangements, and employee engagement and sustainability focuses are put in place, for those who have, particularly for those who may have formed part of the crisis response team. Following on from this, we also note the need for businesses to prioritise the building of operations resilience. Although there is obviously no silver bullet and off-the-shelf solution to how you can all make your businesses more resilient tomorrow, what should be acknowledged and celebrated is the significant redesigns of your operations and supply chains under the previous alert levels, and those decisions that you continue to make today. And as we move forward to rebuild our operations, to adjust to our current changed environment and look now further ahead to the end of 2020 and beyond, it is critical that businesses continue to reassess and broaden their approaches to further protect against wider and more acute ranges of potential shocks. Start by prioritising a plan which enables decisions to be made in a calm environment and based on the most up-to-date information possible, and look first at what areas of the business are currently keeping you up at night and remain critical and relevant to your current core business. Just like the decisions that you had to make around identifying what levers you had available at the beginning of this crisis and in what order and when you needed to pull them, such as employee wage discussions, critical cash flow planning, lease negotiations, and so forth, now is the time to further identify and accelerate the adoption of other levers to strengthen your business's position, such as exploring the use of external suppliers to supplement internal operations, greater workforce cross-training, and the prioritised outsourcing of business functions. To further manage some of the unknown and the pending bursts of supply and demand, businesses should also take up the insights to action business systems approach as they rebuild operations. It is critical that you have a clear plan as to how and where you'll be forming key impressions on areas such as your anticipated customer behaviours. We all know it's not easy to make a decision around how to serve or even anticipate your customers' changing needs in a changed world, but all businesses need to seek out and identify what signals look like for your individual customers. You'll need to adjust your go-to-market and distribution models based on these behaviours, including allowing for the possibility of an accelerated move to digital channels. To inform this, you can use a range of different predictions and analyses and make this as simple or as complicated as you like, but at a basic level, the purpose of this information needs to be rooted in what evidence is out there to inform you on how and where your customers' needs and behaviours are changing. For some businesses, this may require scenario simulation and early warning detections to forecast demand changes in real time. And for others, this may be a matter of making routine the review of information you already have on hand and available to you through your online channels, stores, social media, industry associations, the news, and other third-party sources. Make sure this information is reliable, be targeted and selective about what sources you are using, and above all, make sure that you're prepared to take action to adapt and respond as new information emerges. Finally, when it comes to rebuilding your operations, we recommend that you continue to prioritise rapidly increasing capital and operating expense transparency and look to build your next normal operations around a revamped approach to this. As mentioned previously, having clear visibility on how you're performing against your planned scenarios should support critical decision making, and not to labour the point, we also can't assert any further the need to update your cash flow plans and forecasts accordingly. This can look as complex as you like, but simple approaches such as ensuring your zero ledgers are up to date can all make everyone's lives a little easier. As you look to continue to rebuild your operations, we recommend you prioritise the use of information to balance building resilience in your business alongside identifying opportunities to take action and move with purpose. In terms of retooling for the future, even before we move down different alert levels, opening back up more of our economy and our lives, businesses were asking themselves the key question: can we take what we've learned through the crisis and retool the business for our next normal? As businesses, we recognise that perhaps in some respects, markets and consumers may revert back to how they were before the spread of COVID-19, but that doesn't mean your businesses necessarily have to as well. Over the past few months, there has been a transformation in the way we interact with our whānau, our loved ones, how we do our work, travel, access essential services, spend our weekend and conduct our day-to-day lives. This change has accelerated the uptake and migration to new ways of operating at a rapid pace and across every sector. Some parts of our evolution and retooling are clear. Trends like digital and automation that were present before COVID have accelerated and will continue to do so. But important new questions need to be considered too, such as, will the elements that customers value shift permanently? And as I mentioned previously, in many industries, leaders will have to determine how to serve their customers' actual needs in a changed world. Aligned with our insights to action business systems approach discussed previously, we recommend that businesses refocus digital efforts to reflect their customers' changing expectations. To adapt, companies need to quickly rethink customer journeys and accelerate the development of digital solutions. The emphasis will be different for each sector. For many retailers, this includes creating a seamless e-commerce experience, enabling customers to complete everything they need to do online, from initial research and purchase to service and return. For industries such as hospitality, ensuring health and safety will be key, for example, by reinventing the customer experience with increased contactless booking, ordering, and payment, like we've already seen at Alerts Level 3. To address these challenges, leaders will need to set an ambitious digital agenda and deliver it quickly, across several months as opposed to the previous normal of a year or more. Next, businesses will also need to look at to increase the speed and productivity of digital solutions. To deal with the crisis and its aftermath, businesses not only need to develop digital solutions quickly, but they'll also need to adapt their operating models at scale too. Solving this challenge requires integrating businesses' processes, incorporating data-driven decision-making, and implementing change management. There are different ways to do this, and most Kiwi businesses have had to innovate new capabilities for remote operations almost overnight and complete the digitisation of core business systems in weeks rather than months or years. And they've also had to launch new products in a matter of days as well. We need only to look at the overnight digital transformation of businesses like personal trainers who orchestrated an immediate shift to video consultations and group training sessions, virtual customer engagements of retailers at Alert Level 3, offering in-store personal shopping and styling sessions, and making the most of existing assets in different ways, such as car rental businesses partnering with local supermarkets to offer contactless grocery deliveries through an app. All of these examples and many more identified and accelerated the building out of digital solutions to respond not only to the crisis at hand, but to potentially further future-proof and enhance their business's productivity as a result. Next, embracing the future of work and locking in gains. Both sets of buzzwords and rhetoric we've heard time and time again, but by futurists and by our Prime Minister as well. But what does it mean in this context? The future of work, defined by the use of automation and technology, was always coming. COVID-19 has simply speeded this up. Where previously employers may have been in a long-standing, robust discussions as to how and what it looks like to be productive working from home, we've now all been forced to complete tasks remotely, use digital communications and collaboration platforms, and even learn how to strategically put ourselves on mute or have a malfunctioning camera if still in our pajamas or eating our breakfast. And retooling for the future and looking at businesses' operations, this will progress further, still with an accelerated decline in manual and repetitive tasks and a rise in the need for analytical and technical support. This shift will cause a substantial investment in workforce engagement and learning and development programs around new skills and mindsets required, much of it around delivering the digital tools, but also focusing on making sure we bring our people and customers along the journey with us. In terms of locking in gains, whilst there's definitely been some things that we are all looking forward to as we start to get more normality back in our businesses, as already mentioned, there have also been key learnings and operational gains that have arisen from this. For example, as we all switch to working from home, I know in our office this suddenly meant the long fabled aspiration of a paperless office definitely became a reality, as without home printers, we were forced to adjust. Further still, some businesses learnt that whilst not ideal for all, the construct of working from home isn't as daunting as what it may have seemed before. In other words, in responding to the crisis, we've been presented with some unique opportunities to learn, and in many industries, businesses have shifted to 100% digital overnight. We found a new way of operating, so how can we preserve the speed as we go forward? And most importantly, what are the key gains from this crisis that we should preserve and build out as we retool for the future? The final component we wanted to discuss with you in this proactive strategy, and as we enter the next normal, is around ensuring we hold on to and recognise what Tarunesh discussed earlier around rethinking the organisation and reimagining your sustainable competitive advantage. With today fortuitously being day one of Alert Level 2 in New Zealand, and the focus of the session being about resetting your strategy for the remainder of 2020, it is essential that business leaders don't lose sight of ensuring how you balance working on running and adapting your business to address the challenges of today, at the same time as you keep the bigger picture and ultimate purpose of your business in place. Make sure that you have a balance on how you continue to run the business today and protect and strengthen your core, and enable yourself to also have the space and opportunity to transform the business to realise and make real your purpose too. So with all of this in mind, and I'm sure we've got your head swirling with different concepts and ideas that you need to build out further or start thinking about, I just wanted to end with actually defining for you what we see strategic planning to be and not be. The Cambridge Dictionary defines strategy as a detailed plan for achieving success in situations such as war, politics, business, industry, sport, or the skill of planning for such situations. Planning, the act of deciding how to do something, and for those that might be interested, reset, to change the details of something, to change the position on the controls of a piece of equipment. We therefore see a strategic plan being a document that critically captures what you exist for, your purpose, what you really want to achieve, your vision, and how you're really going to achieve it, the plan. It's not someone telling you how to run your business, as you are the expert and decision maker. You see what direction you want to take. It's not a wish list, because if it was, very little would get done. And it's just not nice to have, it's now essential. Further still, strategy needs to be intertwined with execution. How will you measure your progress and success? Your key performance indicators, both financial and non-financial, and what lead and lag indicators do you need to keep in place to keep an eye on? How and when do you make decisions? Your scenario plans, which of course you'll be regularly reviewing and updating, and how will you resource your strategic plan, your forecast and scenario aligned critical cash flow plans. We therefore believe a good strategic plan needs to capture all of these things. It should support you to act now and protect the business today, and it should also allow you to plan now and retool the business for the future. Thank you for joining us, and now I'd like to hand back over to Phillip Roth to start going through some of your questions.
Thanks very much, Rhea. That's really appreciated. Also, Tarunesh, thank you very much for setting the scene so ably just before. Not surprising, Rhea and Tarunesh, we've had a flood of questions coming through. So we've got about 15 or so minutes to work our way through some of those questions. I'm going to kick off with one of the first ones we've got here. I think it's a good question. It's in relation to the non-government organisation, NGO, and I'll affectionately call it the not-for-loss sector. And effectively the question is, the things that we're talking about today, how applicable and relevant are they to our sector? So obviously a few people have tagged that question through. I'm going to start off, and Rhea, I might then hand over to you. Look, I'm going to say right from the outset, it's at least equally as important. Everything we've talked about is actually becoming so important in those sectors because of, quite frankly, the struggles that are happening around our economy, but mostly societally. It's a massive, massive challenge. What I can say, and I'm sure a number of attendees on this call will agree, is that there's a huge level of positive, genuine collaboration that's already occurring. I personally believe that's the only way a lot of community-based organisations are going to survive. Some, unfortunately, are not going to make it, which is a tragedy. But by all means, can we encourage and challenge you to think about the ways that you should be engaging strategically with other like-minded organisations around this whole strategy reset. That's just my initial feedback, but it is a really good question. Well, plenty more coming in. I'll just get ready for those. But Rhea, do you have any comments?
No, I just think I'd like to support what you've just said, Philip. I think it will be a challenge, and unfortunately we will have some players that may fall out, but I think it'll be that partnerships and where you can align with like-minded individuals and make a plan on how you can work forward together based on having a mutual purpose. So what you exist for, if you have others that exist in a similar place, maybe it makes more sense for you to align and move forward together rather than try and achieve that same purpose individually.
That's great. Thank you very much. We'll move on to a series of questions we've got here. Tarunesh, in no particular order, but one of the questions we've had is, and I quote, can sales restructuring include exiting non-core or poor reducing revenue lines, or conversely, startup revenue lines that absorb costs? And how do we analyse these sorts of challenges? So that's quite a relevant question, Tarunesh, in terms of how we started off the session and what you also touched on before.
Yeah, definitely. It is a very good question, and I think the answer to both of those points, whether you start turning off the tap on certain revenue streams and whether you actively seek out and turn on in other areas, the answer to both of those is certainly yes. It all comes down to what does absolutely core look like, and what is that cost structure that you're trying to match revenue up against? Where's your break-even point? And what has the changes and the challenges that we've all started experiencing over the last few months, what's that done to your demand in the markets that you operate in? If you can start to see, at least, if not the full picture, at least see the trend towards a declining demand for one of your revenue streams, then yes, certainly a viable option is to try and turn it off as quickly as possible to limit the costs associated with actually running that revenue stream. And conversely, on the other side, yes, there have been massive challenges and we're all struggling in some way, shape or form, but there are a number of great opportunities out in the marketplace as well. What this has done, given that we've got a complete rethink and an issue that's so widespread and has affected us all, it means that everyone's forced at the same time to rethink what they do and how they do it. And that's creating opportunities for new revenue streams that either didn't exist previously or perhaps wasn't part of your core plan, only a few months ago. So
that's great, Tarunesh. And I think just to add to that, what we're seeing, even in our own businesses, the day we think we haven't got an opportunity, we wake up the next day and it's a world of opportunities. As tough as it is, that's certainly what we're saying. So no, thanks for that. A following question also is, how easy is it to outsource functions of the business, and where do we start? I'll kick off by saying that's actually a really good question as well. And we're seeing, with what Rhea talked about before, there are really good people, able-bodied people, and people that have great skills who are able to support businesses who are unfortunately jobless at the moment. And what we are really heartened to see is how we can effectively and sincerely redeploy that skill set. So I already know and have seen a number of situations, whether within our own business or businesses we're acting for, we're doing exactly that. I've already got 2 staff out on secondment at the moment. We're actually seeing a huge demand to do that because there is so much change and noise in the marketplace in terms of how we resource what for some businesses actually is a really, really busy time. And we've already heard from a lot of businesses that are already in level 3 that they're swamped in terms of the amount of custom that they have to deliver. You only need to look at the courier drivers in the last few days, and they actually can't keep up. They're about
I think we might have lost sound potentially.
I think you and I are still on there, Rhea. So
Okay.
Do you have any questions there that you want to tackle? I'm happy to jump in.
I'm just picking up on what Phillip was saying around the business outsourcing. I think what's really critical is looking at what you exist for and where you really want to be the expert. And so, I mean, in working with businesses that are starting to think around their marketing opportunities and the mystifying world of SEO and optimization of Google and everything like that, if it's not your core business and it's not where you want to go and play and scale up, then that seems like a logical thing for me that you would outsource. And similarly, in terms of maybe finances, if you require what might be a CFO, but don't actually require someone to be there full-time and obviously have a wage that you'll have to incur full-time, the likes of some of those financial functions might be a really logical thing that you could carve out of what your operations are and outsource it, because that way also you don't have the risk of if someone's sick or has to stay at home or and maybe be quarantined. You've got an outsourced office, so you've got other people around them that might be able to pick up that opportunity.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I completely agree with what you've said there. We've got another question that's come in, and it's really a good question. It's one of those sort of how long is a piece of string questions, but critical, and I think it's something that everyone's grappling with at the moment, which is how do you balance focusing on the here and now and protecting and preserving your business with how do you balance that with what the future looks like for you? Where do you take it over the medium or longer term? The answer, or at least my thoughts on that, are at the end of the day, if you don't have a business and you're not able to truly protect it and preserve it now, you won't have anything, or you'll have very little to take forward into those later phases. So I would certainly weigh a little bit more on the here and now. And once you're then comfortable with your cash flow, with how you've protected what you have, then you can start turning an increasing proportion to what you're doing over the next 6 months through to the end of the year, and then what 2021 looks like. Another couple of scenarios or solutions that we've seen work rather well is businesses actually divide up their management teams into 2 teams. One focused on absolute preservation now, and managing cash flow on a daily basis, and really trying to preserve what's currently existing and what we went into lockdown with. And team 2 focused on what the next 6 months look like. And having those 2 teams work together is absolutely critical, not in silos, so that any decisions taken now feed into what the next version of the business might look like for team 2 to then pick up and run with moving forward. Another piece,
picking up on that, Tarunesh, is that mindset around having a dashboard or something similar to actually visualize the changes of how you run the business and BAU and how you transform the business, because the indicators and information you're going to need to make decisions in those 2 different sort of mindsets will be very different. So we'd very much support businesses as well to They don't need to be overly elaborate or dashboards or anything, but it just needs to be, what are the key information that shows that your business is running well and strongly, so you're running the business, and what is the data that shows that you need to transform or in the process successfully of transforming it. Because as we sort of navigate through it, where we thought we needed to transform to in February looks different to what we have to transform to the end of 2020 alone, let alone the business's purpose with which you set up and want to operate.
Yeah, completely agree. And the only other thing I'd add to that is it's that mindset change that you mentioned and I talked about at the start of the presentation. It's all about this adaptive approach. We're so hardwired to focus on achieving predetermined set targets off in the distance and gathering up every piece of evidence and information that's available to then stack up and support that we will actually hit that target at some point in the future. I think what that does is you put a lot of planning and effort into it, but it also drags out the timeline significantly and really reduces your ability to be agile. What we need moving forward is an approach where we're focused not on that large leap, but more on just shorter steps. And it's all about, almost the main purpose is taking action now. And you do that with whatever information you have to hand at that moment in time. Act quickly, take that step, reflect, learn from it, adjust, and then take another step, which might be in a slightly different direction. Ultimately, when you then add all of those little incremental movements up, you will ultimately end up at the point you want to aim for. You picked up any other questions there? What have we got?
We have a question here from David. He's asked, just how important is it to formalise plans and incorporate it into a strategic or risk plan for retooling? Do you create budgets around such plans? Should KPIs be set to retooling, and how often do you monitor and review the success of plans? It's a really great question. It's sort of the ultimate purpose of this is for us to be able to sort of give a bit more clarity around that sort of question. So I think it's absolutely critical that you formalise a plan, whatever functional construct your leadership group looks like. You all need to be making decisions based on the same reference point. So a strategic plan that considers risk it can be that reference point for you, and making decisions about where and how you allocate resources for it. You do need to be aligning budgets, but being flexible around what that looks like, because as we've already sort of indicated, the next pathway and the next opportunity might look different to what you thought it was going to be. So in terms of retooling and how do you monitor and review the success of plans, it's actually really taking a step back and saying, okay, well, if this is where I am now and this is where I'm wanting to go, what are the steps that show that I'm actually doing, I'm progressing towards that changed position that I'm seeking? So if you look at sort of the likes of an accounting firm, for example, if we wanted to look at how successful we were getting at digitizing our clients and looking at all that, we used a lead indicator to see how quickly we were converting clients to different accounting software and cloud platforms. And so that way we could see that our clients were getting more adept at managing some of their accounting functions themselves. And so that was our indicator that digitization was happening in our industry. And I mean, for us, it definitely happened faster than we thought it might. And it was a really good alert system to show that we really needed to change our digitization plans quicker than we thought.
That's great. Rhea, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I've resolved the issue. It's called taking the headphones out and trying plan B, which is all part of strategy, isn't it, Rhea? We're just coming into land. We've really got just a couple of 3 minutes to go. Tarunesh, there's probably some questions we're just simply not going to have time to address. So as we've agreed, we'll get back to those parties in due course, if that's okay with everyone. Just to finish off, another question that's come in is around the headwinds that have come through in terms of the tourism mobility sectors, and also a lot of property investors that are really struggling. Now, this is really, really topical. We've had a lot of businesses in tourism, as we know, that have really, really struggled and will for the foreseeable future if their reliance is on overseas national tourism. However, the reason that's been asked is what are some of the strategies that we're seeing coming through in terms of helping those sectors in particular? Well, that includes hotels and accommodation, and sadly, we've seen some of those close down indefinitely for the future. Now, I've got some thoughts, but I'm going to open it to Tarunesh and Rhea just at this point, and this will be the last question, unfortunately, we've got time for.
I'll go first. I think the reality of what is being faced by the tourism sector is concerning for all, but I think for some businesses and the comments that have been made in the media and by individuals as well has put a potential over-reliance on what the reality is of international tourists' impact on businesses. It will significantly impact businesses, but I think it's being realistic and having a look at where your customers have come from and what percentage of it was made up by international tourists, and what percentage was actually from your locals, and when they came, what was it that they actually did. So it might be a diversion of some of the activities and resources you had to cater for the needs of international tourists into more localized markets in the short term. But I definitely think as we gear up and get back to business, I know personally I really have made a list of the things in New Zealand that I've always wanted to go and do, but haven't done because I've gone overseas and done all these different things there. But now I really look forward to exploring New Zealand as part of that and investing back in those areas that sometimes I didn't visit because there were too many tourists.
Great, I like it. And Tarunesh?
Yeah, look, I think what you said there, Rhea, is key, right? I mean, it's all about supporting local where we can, and that's one of the greatest ways that we can just support our fantastic tourism industry and help keep as many businesses on their feet as possible. I think for the businesses themselves, it's the opportunity is to look at what you do and actually rethink the options. It's looking at what your infrastructure and assets are, and then having a think about what a different or slightly changed purpose of those assets could be. One example that comes to mind is another one of our clients, Juicy. They've been very, very heavily hit by the impact of COVID-19 and the lack of international travel and lockdown restrictions. But what they did is they pivoted incredibly well and looked at their fleet sitting around and said, look, how can we actually use this to support New Zealand's fight against COVID-19? And they've got vehicles now with courier companies and food delivery companies that are working with at-risk people, delivering essential supplies and food to them that otherwise wouldn't be able to get to those people without the help of Juicy and their fleet. There's also repurposing and different usages and applications for their accommodation assets as well. So it's just taking what you've got and asking the question about what could we use this for that we haven't ever considered before. There's not going to be a silver bullet for everyone like that, and you're not necessarily going to open up a completely different revenue stream, but it's thinking outside the box. I mean, it's something that we might have all thought as completely crazy a few months ago, virtual tours of tourist hotspots. That would have seemed bizarre, a few months ago. Why would you watch a video about it instead of going there? But if you have no other option than to go than to watch the video rather, that's what you do.
I think picking up on that point, Tarunesh, is the concept of a pivot. So the pivot being a line in the sand, a pole in the ground. If you're a netballer, you've got a foot down, and it's how you rotate and move around that. So for the likes of the tourism, like Tarunesh just discussed, why do people come to you in the first place? So they might have come to you, if say you're an art gallery, to look at the artwork, and so to do a virtual tour, you are still doing that same thing. So your foot's still in the same place, but you've just moved around it to look at it from a different lens, and maybe that's just through a camera lens.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rhea. I think you need to go back and play netball again. It's time to resurrect your netball career. Look, we need to bring it in, come into landing here. Just to close on that, because there were some extra comments that came through. without getting ahead of ourselves, we all know, and we wait with bated breath to see what I'll call has been described as the Anzac bubble. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge, but interestingly, some of our tourism clients have already started taking orders for later in the year and next year, in principle, for flights that haven't even been confirmed across the Tasman. It's really interesting. And you'll see Australia advertising in New Zealand. And I saw with interest late yesterday that there is serious discussion about the Pacific as well. So again, put everything in context. There's a lot of vertical and horizontal supply chain opportunities that we haven't even understood at this point. And back to your point, Tarunesh, we need to keep abreast of these opportunities. And as you said, with the virtual tours, it's actually happening already around the world. So a world of opportunities nonetheless. So look, I just want to bring it into land. I want to thank Tarunesh and Rhea sincerely for their time, and also the team behind us that have been helping coordinate this. Sorry about the sound glitch, but we've got it sorted. Just to close, you'll see there's some details from us there. We would generally like to put the offer out there that if you would like to discuss something personal or specific related to your business, please feel free to reach out to one of us. You'll see we've provided our email addresses and our cell phone contact numbers. We have had a lot of calls. We're expecting a lot more after today, but please avail yourself of that opportunity. Secondly, you'll see we've got an advance notice for Thursday, the 21st of May at 9 a.m. as well. One of our colleagues, Andrew Bethel, will be presenting on business recovery and insolvency. Now, that word's a bit tough, but bearing in mind, there's actually a good way to close out some businesses or parts of a business. So we're really keen to have a constructive session. Andrew's looking forward to presenting that with his team. So again, avail yourself of that opportunity in a couple of weeks. Again, remember, this has been recorded. So this has been for your benefit, and if you have others in your networks that you'd like to have involved in this communique, please avail yourself of that opportunity. I think the last word on behalf of myself, Tarunesh, Rhea and the team is we actually want to wish you really well. Got budget this afternoon. We've discussed a lot of strategy opportunities. There's a world of opportunities ahead of us. Yes, there are headwinds, but in some ways those headwinds also cause friction and opportunities. So we want to wish you well. We ask that you keep safe, keep well. Let's all abide by the rules, and New Zealand can remain ahead of the pack, which gives us some competitive advantage already. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next. Have a great day. See you, everyone.